But while we continued to grow, it was never clear sailing. Building the business while managing investments required me to do two challenging jobs simultaneously and develop two distinct skill sets, while being a good father, husband, and friend. The demands of these roles changed over time, so the skills and abilities I needed changed as well. Morning, everybody. Even though Zoom decided it didn't want to work for the first couple of minutes, Bigo was up and running, so we've been chatting about all sorts of different things. But now that Zoom is working again and we can record this, we're going to be reading Principles by Ray Dalio. And we are in chapter 5, I think it was. And we are at the section to remain a beautiful boutique or become a great institution. So we've been talking about some of the things that have worked well for Ray Dalio and his company Bridgewater. We've talked about the ups and the downs. We've talked about where he has failed and how he's been creating his systems and how he has been creating his principles. And I'm glad that finally Zoom is working, because the video was working, but the Zoom wasn't for some reason, but we are online now. So let's get straight into it since we are running a little bit later. To remain a beautiful boutique or become a great institution. With our people and culture producing these industry-shaping investment products, Bridgewater really took off. By 2000, we were managing more than 32 billion, almost 8 times what we had been managing just 5 years before. Our headcount had doubled, so we moved out of our strip mall into a larger space situated in a nature preserve on the banks of the Saugatuck River. But while we continued to grow, it was never clear sailing. Building the business while managing investments required me to do two challenging jobs simultaneously and develop two distinct skill sets, while being a good father, husband, and friend. The demands of these roles changed over time, so the skills and abilities I needed changed as well. Most people assume that the challenges that go along with growing a large business are greater than those of growing a smaller one. That is not true. Going from a 5-person organization to a 60-person organization was just as challenging as going from a 60-person organization to a 700-person organization, and from a 700-person organization to a 1,500-person one. Looking back, I can't say that the challenges were easier or harder at any of the various phases we went through. They were just different, and that's always going to be the case. So there is challenge in everything. Everything has its ebbs and flows. But I want to quickly share a story from something that I heard yesterday. I saw a quick little video of Steve Harvey, and he was talking about a time when he lost his job. So he lost his job, and he didn't have to wake up early anymore. And one of his friends called him up at 5:30 in the morning. So he picks up the phone. He's like, "What do you want? I'm still sleeping." And the other friend says, "It's a beautiful day. Get up. Have a really, really nice day. It's a new opportunity, new day. Have a great day." And then hangs up. He does this for about 2 or 3 weeks in a row. And Steve's getting quite annoyed by this. And so Steve's like, "Listen, I don't have to be up. Why do you keep calling me?" And so the other guy then calls him back the next morning and says, "You have a bad attitude. You need to fix that so that you can go and get some really amazing things done in your life." And gets Steve thinking. So the next morning, he wakes up before 5:30 and he is ready for the call. And he picks up the phone when the phone rings. And before the other guy can start talking to him and telling him that it's an amazing day, Steve says, "I feel great. Thank you so much for calling. I am going to have an amazing day. I want you to have an amazing day. I love my life." And he's just completely positive about it. And I think that is what helps you to get through these kinds of challenges, where you might have things that are not going to be smooth or things don't go exactly the way you want. But with a positive attitude, it's going to be so much easier than if you see it from the negative side. So I thought that was a really great example of how to get through some of these kinds of challenges. Okay. For example, when I had no one to manage, I had the challenge of having to do almost everything myself. When I learned and earned enough to pay others, I had the challenge of managing them. Similarly, the challenges of wrestling with market and economic swings were constantly changing. I didn't think about it then, but it's obvious to me now that while one gets better at things over time, it doesn't become any easier if one is also progressing to higher levels. The Olympic athlete finds the sport to be every bit as challenging as the novice does. Very soon we faced another critical choice. What kind of company did we want to have? Should we continue to grow or stay about the same size? By 2003, I had come to believe that we needed to grow Bridgewater into a real institution instead of remaining a typical boutique-sized investment manager. Doing this would make us better in many ways. Better technology, better security controls, a deeper talent pool, all of which would make us more stable and permanent. This meant hiring more people in technology, infrastructure, and other areas, as well as additional HR and IT staff to train and support them. Giselle argued strongly that we should not grow. She believed that introducing a lot of new people would threaten our culture, and that the time and attention that hiring, training, and managing them required would dilute our focus. While I agreed with her point, I didn't like the alternative of not allowing ourselves to become all we could be. I felt about this fork in the road choice the way I felt about most others, that whether or not we could have our cake and eat it too was merely a test of our creativity and character. For example, I could envision ways in which technology would help us get the most out of people. After a fair amount of wrestling with these questions, we decided to go ahead. And this is always one of those interesting things. We always have to make those choices. Do we go further? Do we stay where we are? And I think going further is something that is a part of the human condition. It's something that we are automatically going to desire and want. We want to showcase what's possible for us. We want to show the world how far we can reach and what we can achieve and what we can do. But obviously, there are companies that stay smaller, companies that do grow bigger. And so we just have to see what fits us and what we feel like in that moment and do what feels right to us. Fleshing out principles. Ever since Bob, Giselle, and Dan had presented me with the Ray feedback memo in the 1990s, I had been much more explicit in writing down and sharing my work principles in the same way I'd written down my investment principles. At first, this took the form of shared philosophy statements and emails to the entire company. Then, whenever something new came along that required me to make a decision, I would reflect on my criteria for making that decision and write it down as a principle so people could make the connections between the situation, my principle for handling these situations, and my actions. More and more, we saw everything as another one of those, another of a certain type of situation like hiring, firing, determining competition, dealing with dishonesty, that had principles for handling them. By having them explicitly written out, I could foster the idea meritocracy by having us together reflect on and refine those principles and then adhere to them. The numbers of principles started small and grew over time. By the mid-2000s, Bridgewater was beginning to grow rapidly, and we had a number of new managers trying to learn and adapt to our unique culture, and who were increasingly asking me for advice. I was also beginning to have people from outside Bridgewater ask me how they could create idea meritocracies of their own. So in 2006, I prepared a rough list of about 60 work principles and distributed them to Bridgewater's managers so they could begin to evaluate them, debate them, and make sense of them for themselves. It's a rough draft, I wrote in the covering memo, but it is being put out now for comments. And this is really important. I believe that when you have a company or when you are investing, you want to be able to document everything that happens and what works and what doesn't work. And the more you can come up with rules for yourself, the more you can then reread and follow them, as opposed to always guessing and always hoping for the best. And hoping for the best is not really a great strategy. So this is a really great way of doing it. I think everybody should. I think it's Dr. John DeMartini who has this self-book. I think somebody told me that he's up to version 60 or something. He's written, filled all of these books. And what he does is he writes down his life's mission and what his good decisions have been, what his bad decisions have been, how he wants his life to turn out. And he writes down every single aspect of everything that he wants to do. And this should include your principles of how you treat your staff, how you invest, how you work, how you interact with other people, all of these different things, how you find the partner of your dreams, whatever it is that you want to achieve, whatever it is that you want to bring to this world, that you want to contribute, you put that in there. This began an ongoing evolutionary process of encountering many situations, forming principles about how to deal with them, and getting in sync with other Bridgewater leaders and managers about them. Over time, I encountered most everything there is to encounter in running a company. So I had a few hundred principles that covered most everything. That collection of principles, like our collection of investment principles, became a kind of decision-making library. Those principles are the basis of what you'll find in work principles. But it wasn't enough to codify and teach our philosophy. We had to live it. As the company grew bigger, how that happened evolved. In Bridgewater's early days, everyone knew each other, so being radically transparent was easy. People could attend the meetings they wanted to and communicate with each other informally. But as we grew, that became logically impossible, which was a real problem. How could people engage productively with the idea meritocracy? They didn't know everything that was going on. Without transparency, people would spin whatever happened to suit their own interests, sometimes behind closed doors. Problems would be hidden instead of brought to the surface where they could be resolved. So to have a real idea meritocracy, there must be transparency so that people can see things for themselves. To make sure this happened, I required that virtually all our meetings be recorded and made available to everyone with extreme rare exceptions, such as when we were discussing very private matters. I think I've got 2 pages, yes. Such as personal health or proprietary information about a trade or decision rule. At first, I sent these tapes of management meetings unedited to the entire company, but that was a huge burden on people's time. So I built a small team to edit the tapes, focusing on the most important moments, and over time, we added questions to create virtual reality case studies that could be used for training. Over time, these tapes became a part of a boot camp for new employees, as well as a window into an ongoing stream of situations connected to the principles for handling them. All this openness led to some very frank discussions about who did what and why, and as a result, we were able to deepen our understanding of our different ways of thinking. This was enlightening to all of us in showing how differently people's brains worked. If nothing else, I could better appreciate people I'd once wanted to strangle. Moreover, I recognized that managers who do not understand people's different thinking styles cannot understand how the people working for them will handle different situations, which is like a foreman not understanding how his equipment will behave. That insight led us to explore psychometric testing as a way of learning how people think differently. I think this is really amazing. So this book comes from all of those recordings and all of those different things that he did, that Ray did for his staff and his company. And this is something that we can implement in all of our own lives, where we have a look at what you could do this at the end of every day. Have a bit of a debrief. What went well today? What didn't go so well? What could I do to improve? What do I want tomorrow to look like? And what do I need to do in order to be able to have tomorrow become the kind of day that I want it to become? So this is a great way of being able to have better days every day. But also it's a really great way to be able to write later in life, because you can use all of those principles and all of those things that you've learned throughout your life to create a book with your principles. Obviously, you might not do that, and you don't have to, but it is interesting how this is what Ray Dalio did. So we're going to leave it at that. I need to start going. My phone battery is also almost dead because I couldn't charge it in the usual way yesterday, which is completely fine. There is still enough battery to be able to finish up, and then we'll charge it. I definitely made sure that there was still enough for this reading this morning. Always make sure that you are well prepared. And so I'm going to leave you to it. We're going to have a look at who is on Bigo in just a moment. But first of all, if you enjoyed this and if you'd like to watch more recordings, you can actually see all of the recordings of this Principles by Ray Dalio, as well as Rich Dad Poor Dad, which we also read, and The Art of Thinking Clearly. And you can find all of that on YouTube at the Passive Cash Flow Club, which is our YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe, because we've also been answering your questions, and people who come to Cashflow, we've been answering their questions. So you can find those, and if you subscribe, you'll get the notifications as to when they are being uploaded. If you would like to ask a question, if you would like more information about cash flow, that amazing game that allows you to simulate your life and be able to learn about how to invest before you make any mistakes, make mistakes in the game, and then go out into real life, and we'll help you with that bridge to transition from the game to real life. Then get in touch on Instagram as well. So business_team_6_official. You'll be able to find me there, send me a personal message, and ask your questions, and I'll get my VA to send you the details on how to join. And yes, finally, I'm going to leave you with, make sure to make the switch to unlock your rich, because if you make some small little switches, if you stop doing things the way that you've always done them, and you start doing things differently by simulating and learning new things and asking questions, if you didn't do that before, then that is what's going to make the difference between you succeeding and not. So make the switch to unlock your rich. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow, 8 a.m. Not tomorrow. I'll see you on Monday. It's already Friday. I'll see you Monday, 8 a.m. for another reading. And thank you so much for joining.